Hello everyone, I am the Golden Scouta, and welcome to a special Halloween video. I want to preface this video. I started watching Dragon Ball when it first started to air on Toonami, and I loved it ever since. Well, back then, it was airing a censored and edited version of the show, and when it was released on VHS and DVD, there used to be two versions of the show, edited and uncut. And I got the uncut version of each tape every chance I could. A lot of the times there were just edits to the blood shown and small script changes, but occasionally you would find entire scenes that were edited out due to them being deemed unsuitable for children. Now obviously none of these scare me anymore, since around the age of 13 or 14 is when I started watching R-rated movies and got into horror movies in general. So these are all Weenie Hut Jr. to me in terms of scary or freaky. But without further ado, let's talk about the top 5 scenes in Dragon Ball that scared me as a kid. Number 5. Baby possessing people. First up is one from Dragon Ball GT. When I was a kid, one of my biggest and irrational fears was the idea of my loved ones turning against me. Couple that with Baby essentially being a pathogen that enters your body through scrapes and cuts, you have a perfect recipe for something that would scare me, even as I was dipping my toe into the horror movie genre at the time. There are scenes that stand out to me, like when Vegeta gets possessed and you see Baby's face pop out of his skin, the scene where Trunks gets possessed and he's crawling away whenever he arrives back on Earth, and whenever Gohan attacks Pan. The idea of a parent's willpower and love for their child not being enough to break someone's control over them can be quite scary for a young child to see. Also, I don't think I've ever felt any kind of genuine tension for Goku ever since I first saw this arc. And this is because he was almost completely on his own in fighting with Baby until the final episodes. Nothing from Super has ever invoked that kind of feeling for me, that's for sure. This goes lower on the list because I found Baby's possessions to be more psychologically scary than visually scary. Number 4. Goku's Nightmare. If you watch the anime, you would know that there are numerous scenes which depict the Dragon Team being killed by numbers 17 and 18, so it really got drilled into your head about what happened in Trunks' timeline. When Goku had a dream about 17 and 18, it felt more like a premonition rather than a simple dream, especially if it was your first time watching the arc and didn't know about the Buu arc or any of the future movies. Watching Gohan and Krillin die and then future Trunks stabbed with his own sword made this scene have that premonition feel to it, that even with Trunks' warning, all this was bound to happen. Add on to Goku basically astral projecting within the dream and being unable to defend his unconscious body, and you truly have something that is straight out of a nightmare that you would wake up in a cold sweat to. When you're a kid, it can be an unsettling thing to watch the heroes of your favorite show lose, especially without a real fight. However, whenever you're older, you can poke a little bit of fun at it by the obvious fact that there's no way that Goku could know what 17 or 18 looked like at the time. Number 3. Babidi killing Spopovich. This is one of those Dragon Ball deaths that came completely out of left field. This was done for the purpose of making Babidi look intimidating and to emphasize how evil he is, and oh boy, did it fulfill that purpose well. When I first saw this scene, it was clear to me why there was an edited and uncut versions of Dragon Ball home releases, because I would easily put this episode into the TV-14 or MA rating for just this scene alone. It is overall just hard to watch, even if Spopovich deserved it for what he did to Videl. Visually, I think this may be one of the most over-the-top scenes in all of Dragon Ball. I won't go on and on because there isn't really a need to. It is just visually scary for a kid to watch. Number 2. Cell hunting down and absorbing people. You knew this was going to be on this list. I am including multiple of Cell's absorptions and him hunting down people on this list because It would take up multiple entries if I separated them. Seeing when he was first introduced with all the piles of clothing scattered around the town, and seeing him absorb that man by draining out all of his fluids, and eventually everything he was hard to watch whenever I first saw it. There was nothing like this in the Saiyan or Frieza arc, so it was shocking to see it happening. 17 and 18's absorptions are both disturbing in their own right, and it seemed like Cell enjoyed them a little bit too much. And it became even more apparent when I watched Dragon Ball in Japanese for the first time several years later. It's crazy how Dragon Ball Super chose to expand on this. Rather than 17 and 18 being unconscious within Cell, 17 revealed he was conscious and aware of what was happening the entire time. Seems like a fate worse than death. But there's one scene in particular that stands out to me, where Cell is hunting down a couple in one of those fun houses full of mirrors. That was pretty much like a scene out of a horror movie. Cell was sure a scary villain in his first form. I could see why they toned it down a little bit for his two other forms. So here are some honorable mentions before I get to the number 1 spot. The Blackwater Mist. I think that this would have freaked me out a bit more if Piccolo, Gohan, and Krillin weren't already far above all the other heroes in strength, so they pretty much just had to worry about Garlic Jr.'s henchmen and Garlic Jr. himself. Gohan's Nightmare. Similar to Goku's Nightmare, but I think that because it was 17 and 18 that were the ones that wreaked havoc on Trunks' timeline, Goku's just had more impact. And by the time I saw this episode, I pretty much was spoiled what was going to happen at the end of the arc. Frieza's and Cell's transformations. Toei did actually a very excellent job of making their transformations seem as intimidating as possible. Good job on their part. Piccolo Daimao and his children killing the tournament participants. Back before large groups of people were wished back with the Dragon Balls, you really felt the impact of death at this point of the show. Majin Buu killing Babidi. If I would have seen the uncensored Japanese version of this scene before I saw the English and edited version, I think it would have freaked me out. The way the uncut version was animated also adds quite a bit to the scene. I just think English dub Majin Buu sounds too silly for him to be intimidating. So, what could have possibly topped all of Cell's absorptions in the scary department when I was a kid? Well, number 1. Super Buu liquefying and force-feeding himself to the gunman. When I first saw this scene, it was the one that disturbed me the most out of any scene I saw in any cartoon/anime at this point of my life. It didn't help that right before it happened, it looked like Buu purposefully let his guard down to where the bullets just shot right through him, and then he laughed a very devilish laugh which uneased me enough on its own. Then he makes a freaky scream as he launches and liquefies and then force feeds himself to the gunman. Seeing that man blow up until the point where he exploded was like something straight out of a horror film. Getting absorbed by Cell seemed like the worst possible way to die out of anything I had previously seen in Dragon Ball, but this, in my opinion, seemed even worse. When I later saw in the Z anime when he did the same with Vegito, I felt the same sense of squeamishness. Out of all the scenes in Dragon Ball that disturbed me when I first saw it, this is hands down the one that did the most. I think it made such an impact because prior to this, Majin Buu really only killed people by either turning them into candy or vaporizing them with ki blasts. Well, there you have it. Tell me what you guys think. Did any of these scare you when you were younger? Were there other scenes that I didn't cover that you want to talk about? Let me know in the comments section. But with that, thank you all for watching, and have a happy Halloween.